Now when it comes to Kendrick Lamar and the game, well now if you are ready to see how after trying to lie on Kendrick's name, well we have officially found out that Kendrick Lamar and his people hate this guy and it's a lot worse than you could think. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe. And now really, as we have gotten the most definitive proof that Kendrick really has lost all of his respect for the game. And well, with that, we are seeing how a West Coast rapper betrayed Kendrick and how he and his people are not afraid to let everybody know. Really make sure to leave a like and subscribe because this is important and everybody needs to see what's going on here. Which, just to give some context to how this all started, well, it all came when Game was doing an interview with none other than Big Boy. And well, while he was in this interview, he talked about meeting Kendrick Lamar for the first time. And then he also talked about how he wanted to sign Kendrick, which I am just going to play for you right here.
Linked my, 2 cents. I was a little bit, ahead of the curve and from where they were. And I was always asking, Chop, I was like, let me get it, let me get that. He was just like, no.
And so with this clip, which I couldn't show the full thing, but there is a lot more banter where the game is saying that he wanted to sign Kendrick and well some other stuff, which both seemed like he was pulling a LeBron James and trying to take credit for something that he didn't see. And he was also talking in a very condescending way, as he was trying to very subliminally kind of talk down Kendrick, as in the entire clip he refers to Kendrick as, and I quote, a funny little guy. And then even when he talks about how Kendrick grew up and how it's different than the lifestyle the game lived, he almost says it like he's implying that Kendrick is lesser than him or he is not as tough, which is a weird thing to do, but I mean, this is Game in 2025. We can't expect anything less. And now with this, well, as the game was trying to say that he saw Kendrick's potential to become one of the greatest artists and one of the greatest rappers that we have ever seen, and well, he was trying to talk to Top Dog and get him to sign to him, and he wanted to mentor Kendrick and turn him into the next superstar. Well, listen, while we could have just speculated and talked about this in general, we have actually gotten direct confirmation and a response to Game from none other than Kendrick Lamar's camp. And we haven't just heard this now from one person within it, but we have heard a response from 2 people, which now the first person here, and this is very significant, that ended up responding to Game is none other than 2T's, which for those who don't know, well, here is a picture of him, and this is Kendrick's longtime bodyguard, and well, seemingly a very close friend, and somebody that's been with him for a very long time in his career. And now what he ended up saying, well, is that the game is faking and he never wanted to sign Kendrick, and he put a bunch of exclamation points to really just drive this home, which just with this first off, with Kendrick Lamar's bodyguard of all people coming out and just publicly saying that what the game is saying here is a sheer and utter lie. It's showing a disconnect, but don't worry, there are some more things that ended up happening. As well, another close friend of Kendrick Lamar and another person who has been with him since day one and is on the TPAB cover if you're gonna question that, well, also ended up responding to the game saying this, and what he said is that all the game does is lie for clout, which once again, to see that coming from somebody who was literally ingrained in the Kendrick Lamar Hall of Fame, just in terms of being on the TPAB cover, the tone and the way this is being addressed speaks volumes. And if you needed any more, 2T's came back out and doubled down on his take, as he said that he is not doing any faking this year. And with all of this, well, from 2 people who have been very close to Kendrick Lamar for not just a few years or for a moment, but since their inception within the rap game, to just see Game getting spoken about this way, I mean, it's very clear to just see that we now know that, well, Kendrick Lamar's side of people really do not mess with the game, and they have really lost all respect for him. And I really think when we address this beef, that's really the best way to just contextualize it, which is that they lost all respect for him. Because clearly, even with the way that Kendrick's people are addressing Game and addressing his actions, it's not like they're even mad per se, but they're just talking about the game at this point. like he is some cartoonish villain who constantly keeps messing up his own plans by just saying and trying to perpetuate the most ridiculous things that you could even fathom. And really with that, I think it's fair to say that in terms of all of the beefs that Kendrick Lamar has, out of all of the beefs that people have decided to start with Kendrick Lamar and well, he has had to stand on, this game one may be the most complicated situation. Because if we go back in time and we look at when Kendrick started to rise, and well, the game was still a very big name in hip-hop. The game and Kendrick did get along when Kendrick was coming up in this thing, as I mean on all of Game's biggest albums, from 2011 with the Red Album, which of course featured the track The City, which was one of the best Kendrick Lamar features really to this day, but definitely back then without a doubt. And then I mean in 2012, he was right on Game's next album only a year later. And then when Kendrick really did become a full-on superstar, he was even on the documentary too. So back then, we clearly saw that things were good between Kendrick and the Game, and I guess in terms of the West Coast rap lineage, well, as the Game was the guy who really held the torch for him in the 2000s, and Kendrick took it in the 2010s. Their partnership made sense, and it really did make the West Coast all the stronger, which is why when we see Kendrick's people have to talk about Game like this, because at the end of the day, this is all Game's fault, and he gave him no choice. It is sad and tragic in a way, because just like a lot of people that had a falling out with Kendrick Lamar and that turned against him as he ascended higher and higher in the rap game, what you see is that their beef really started and a lot of this tension started to rise. Well, just when Kendrick Lamar became bigger than they ever did and gained all the more success than they ever saw, all while never having to compromise his integrity once or do something that is just genuinely embarrassing, which a lot of these rappers, and especially the Game, well, they cannot sit here and say. And I think when we just look at the entire trajectory of the Game and Kendrick, the Game has really put himself into a corner here, and there is no longer anything he could do, and I just think Kendrick's people speaking about him so publicly and just showing that he is a pathetic, lying clout chaser, that's not only the proof that is showing us that Kendrick definitely doesn't like the guy, but it also means that Kendrick really does not believe that the Game ever coming to a place where they could find some sort of mutual respect or just, patch things up for the betterment of the West. I mean, he thinks that's all gone. And when you really just think about what Kendrick has done for the West Coast, from putting on all of the artists that he did on GNX, to even the Pop Out where we saw a celebration of West Coast hip-hop culture within a fashion like we have never seen, it's important to understand that if Kendrick loves not just rap, but where he is from and what hip-hop means to it as much as he does, which it's very clear that he is trying to be the embodiment and really the face of all of it, and not just help himself, but everybody else that he possibly can. To sit here and be at a point where he and his people are calling the Game pathetic, and well, it's starting to become very clear that he has just lost all hope for the classic Game and the guy who made some of the best albums of the 2000s and early 2010s to ever come back. Kendrick has seen the absolute worst in him, and there's probably a lot more behind the scenes that I'm sure we don't even know. But if we just break down why Kendrick really now has fully turned on the Game and why he will never piece it up with him, I mean, at the end of the day, the Game has nobody to blame but himself, because the guy has been an absolute walking clown to not just himself or his legacy, but in the process of the Game's run over the last 5 years or so, he's managed to try and tarnish and destroy the name of both the West Coast and its hip-hop scene as a whole, but also the people who helped build him, which, if we remember, of course, that Dr. Dre helped make the Game, and well, he played an integral role, not just in handing him that torch to the West Coast, but in making him a real rap superstar at a time with albums like The Documentary, and well, everything that was built around that moment in time. Well, I know it kind of feels weird now, but if you remember in 2022, the Game really did go on a whole press tour where he vowed to pretty much try and take down Dr. Dre's legacy and his impact in hip-hop, which of course is undeniable, but I mean, he was foolish enough to even try it, and just smear his name in whichever way he can, which, from saying things like Kanye did more in 2 weeks than Dre did for him in his entire career. And I mean, really, besides giving Game the beat for the track Dreams from the documentary, which is one of the best rap songs of the 2000s, what else did Kanye even do for him? Meanwhile, at the same time, Dre helped Game get right next to 50 Cent and Eminem like they were a musical dynasty. I mean, even when we just think about the pop out and see how the Game was of course not there and we found out that he wasn't invited, and well, we saw Dr. Dre come out as the legend on that stage when of course he did Still Dre, then him and Kendrick did California Love, and then Dr. Dre cued us into Not Like Us. Having Dr. Dre really be the gatekeeper there for West Coast hip-hop history. When you even think about the lineage and pantheon that Kendrick has created all through the love and desire to have unity in the West, the Game stands in the way of all of that with his beef with Dr. Dre, and I think even when we look at that 2022 Super Bowl, which seemingly the reason why Game turned on Dr. Dre and started saying all these ridiculous things, it was because Dre didn't ask him to play in the halftime show, which on a side note, I think that 2022 Super Bowl halftime show really needs its own analyzation, because I think in terms of creating a lot of the riffs and beefs in hip hop and in music that we see today, there were ripple effects to that I do think ended up resulting in a lot of the stuff we saw during Kendrick vs. Drake, but there's still so much unresolved there between all of the different players. As well, to put it simply, a lot of rappers' egos were really taken down in that time. As well, from 50 Cent, which that was a whole other thing, and that's a whole other video, and that seems to start a lot of the reason why he had animosity to Kendrick Lamar when all the Drake stuff was going down, to the Game not being asked at all, and then him turning on Dr. Dre, and him even projecting a lot of that jealousy onto Kendrick Lamar. There's so much in terms of the lineage of hip-hop and all of these major players who have been at the face of their respective eras and who are always at the center of the culture, whether that's for better or for worse with a lot of them. A lot of these issues that we are talking about right now really do seem to stem back to that very moment, and when you look at how the Game already just managed to absolutely ruin his reputation with Dr. Dre, and then in addition to that, you also see how the Game has been one of the only guys in the West Coast, and again, as somebody who literally handed Kendrick the torch, it's almost offensive how he clearly took a pro-Drake stance during the beef and ultimately let his love for Drake pretty much separate him from the rest of his coast. Because really with Game, kind of like what J. Cole does, to see him kind of act like he was passive, but really by being passive and acting like he didn't want any division or he didn't want to pick sides, he was really picking Drake's side, and I mean, to this day, he supports a lot more pro-Drake things than pro-Kendrick. In that moment, in the biggest rap beef of all time, and in this moment where the West Coast was tested, and we really did find out how much the rest of the music world just doesn't respect or want to see the West Coast on top for whatever reason that may be. The Game just choosing to take the side of the Canadian cupcake Karen over Kendrick Lamar, who again, he passed the torch within that ever iconic moment, where Kendrick really was crowned as that next guy in the lineage of Ice Cube, Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, Game, and then all the way, of course, to Kendrick, as the next face of this integral and really genre-shifting, culturally defining aspect that has changed hip-hop like no other. Well, when you just see all of this and see the Game just standing out here and lying like an absolute loser now, it's no surprise why Kendrick's people are talking about him the way they are, and I think what makes all of this a little worse when you think about it and just shows how far the Game really has fallen, because really that's exactly what's went on here. This is a catastrophic fall off, which honestly is sad, because unlike a lot of these losers in rap who do fall off, the Game used to be an amazing rapper, and really from the years 2005 to 2015, he put out a run of classic albums, genre-defining albums, some of the best albums of the 2000s, and those early 2010 Game records. Those albums like the Red Album were some of the best of their time. So to see him go from that and really just a figure that stood for so much and was the face of the West Coast until Kendrick, and well, now he's a Drake-loving, verse-scamming cornball? This is just such a sad descent to see, and once again it is showing us that even in terms of the inner workings of the West Coast, the Game couldn't handle somebody like Kendrick, who again wasn't down and in the very culture of all the stuff that Game was. And well, as Game says, he was kind of a nice guy and he was humble and he wasn't involved within these same circles that while Game believed you needed to be in to be a so-called tough guy, to see Kendrick rise to the way he did while never conforming to any of the standards that not just the music industry demanded, but also the very culture that allowed rappers to ever be seen by it, I think that's really the factor with Kendrick Lamar that makes so many rappers just completely break and lose all integrity and just decency when they talk about him, and then they end up having this weird kind of beef standoff with him. Because honestly, for a lot of these guys who probably did whatever the industry told them to, and well, they were always chasing trends whether they were really good at it or not. It must be absolutely maddening to see the biggest rapper in the world and the most important name in the entire space will become just that, while again, as Kendrick told us on the Mask Off remix he did with Future, well, a conscious rapper went commercial while only making conscious albums. And I think one of the reasons why Kendrick's people just told Game off in this very moment and said, "We are done," is also the fact that while Game is outside lying about Kendrick and trying to big bro him in these stories he is telling, well, he's only doing it and he's trying to pick up this attention because he has a new project dropping. Which, I mean, if we go back to the album he dropped in 2022 with Drillmatic, which, well, was that whole weird Clout chasey record where he made the whole thing about dissing Dr. Dre and Eminem, and he kind of used that whole 10-minute Eminem diss track, which ended up amounting to nothing, well, as the big draw-in for the album that everybody should listen to for, and as this statement that was going to change rap forever and just destroy Eminem's name and expose him. Listen, even with that album Drillmatic, which did have a lot of very good music on it, the Game is a competent rapper, and that's what's so frustrating about his fall off. Once again, even though the Drake stans love this guy because he's against Kendrick, the Game really does what they say Kendrick does, and actually Drake does, which is to use disses for the purpose of dissing somebody or creating controversy to actually get listeners to engage with a project. And I think right now with what we are seeing here, and with the Game always trying to pander and appeal to Drake fans, especially now, I think that's what we're seeing here, is the Game does have a project dropping, which is going to be a Gangsta Grillz project, the first of his career, so of course it's with the one and only DJ Drama, and the record did just come out, and it's brand new, but I'm sure on that record he is going to be making moves to try and just get more listeners to come in by, well, using this very feud that he has been in the middle of in so many different ways to, well, pick one side, finally claim his flag there, and ultimately disappoint the very coast that he is from, because I don't know how else to say it when you look at this in terms of hip-hop and just the West Coast lineage that he has been a part of. He's on the wrong side of everything, and it's genuinely sad to see. And again, while Game is a competent rapper, to just see him resort to all of these things, it's sad. And I think as Kendrick Lamar sees these very things, and he sees despite whatever skill Game has, he is just going to continue to resort to clown antics to, well, get across or do whatever he's trying to do, well, here we are. And ultimately, while this is unfortunate, well, I guess as Kendrick Lamar told us, and he always knew was going to come, this entire chapter and moment we are in, while a lot is changing in rap and nobody knows what the future is going to look like, one thing that Kendrick Lamar knew he was going to do when he did all of this was just expose everybody who has ever been a fake, a fraud, and who has ever stood against him. And well, just like we are seeing now to this very day, they are never going to get over it. And that's what we got right now. Let me know your thoughts on Kendrick Lamar and his people finally showing that they don't mess with the Game. And listen, it's a special day. It's a big day, and we are going to have fun this Friday. And so more stuff is going to be dropping very soon. So be ready for that, because it's going to be a big day. But listen, if you want to see how right before this, in the meantime, well, on another note, with a very weird beef, Drake just crashed out on Childish Gambino after Gambino dissed him at Camp Flog Gnaw. And well, with how Drake and his team freaked out, it's definitely a good one with how pathetic they really got. You're not going to want to miss this one, so check out the suggested video.